This is the Steam Deck. Valve's latest attempt at creating hardware that would give the user the ability to detach themselves from their gaming setups with big chunky PC cases, a keyboard and a mouse, and one or more big chungus monitors, and fling themselves into any room of their house and even outside of it. Now, there is definitely a charm to this device, and the premise does sound quite amazing. You know, the whole take your PC games anywhere you want kind of spiel. And while this does deliver on that most of the time, there are definitely some drawbacks to this device that make it maybe not worth it to a lot of people. So without further ado, let's get into this video about my first impressions of this Steam Deck, which I've had for several weeks at this point, and I tested several games out. I think I have a pretty good grasp on what this device is capable of and what it's not. And hey, maybe after this video, you will know if the Steam Deck is something for you or if it is not. LambdaGeneration. The Steam Deck comes in 3 different models. The 64GB eMMC variant, which is the most basic one with slower storage, the 256GB one with faster storage and goodies for your Steam profile, and then we got the 512GB one with anti-glare etched glass and more exclusive goodies. All of these variants also come with a carrying case. Now, I chose the 256GB model because I thought that was quite good enough for my use case. All the variants are pretty much the same on the inside though, apart from the storage size. The Steam Deck has a custom AMD APU that merges together a Zen 2 2.4 to 3.5 GHz processor with 8 RDNA 2 compute units. It has 16GB of LPDDR5 RAM with eMMC or NVMe storage depending on the model you choose. The highest tier Steam Deck even comes with a high-speed NVMe SSD. On the surface of the device, you'll find your 2 joysticks on the left and right of the 1280 by 800 7-inch display. You got a pretty nice feeling D-pad on the left and your basic XYBA face buttons to the right. Underneath the D-pad and the face buttons, you'll find 2 touchpads that you can rub your thumb over or click down. And right underneath them, you got the Steam button to the left and the Quick Access button on the right, which both respectively open up the Steam menu and a menu for additional utilities. Oh, and let's not forget the pause and select buttons on the top of the device. On the very top, you got the 2 triggers and bumpers, the triggers actually being analog, so it takes into account how far you push them in. The volume buttons are also right here, together with the headphone jack and the power button. On the back, you got these grip buttons that you can map to any function you want in the games you play. I found them to be a little bit stiff though. And lastly, at the bottom of the device, you got a bare naked SD card slot for expendable storage. This way, you can easily add an additional 1 terabyte of storage to your deck if you can somehow barf up the money for that.
Why do I keep eating money?
The whole thing seems pretty well built actually. It has that similar feel that the had, but a little bit more premium. I'm actually pretty sure they use the same kind of plastic for it even. Now, originally I've never really been a big fan of that kind of plastic, but on the Steam Deck, honestly, it feels pretty alright, and I think it's really helped by the glass screen that's implanted in front of it, which adds a little bit of extra weight to it, I feel. And, you know, just touching the touchscreen itself just feels nice. I really like how Valve chose to put glass in this and not just plastic, like what the Nintendo Switch originally did. Alright, now let's finally take a look at the software. It's Steam, specifically Steam Big Picture, but completely updated and redesigned. All of the features you can expect from Steam are basically here. You can interact with your friends, buy games, see news and activities around the games you like the most, and of course, you can play the games. Okay, now underneath Steam, there is an entirely different layer though. The Linux layer, which is easily accessible by long pressing the power button and by pressing switch to desktop. SteamOS is basically an entire Arch-based operating system with the KDE Plasma desktop environment applied to it, giving it a relatively clean look. From here, you can do basically anything you want, from browsing the web, signing up to LambdaGeneration.com for the best content from the Valve community, and you can even dig through some of the Steam Deck's file system. So technically, modding your games on the deck is possible. I was actually able to mod Grand Theft Auto San Andreas to get Silent Patch, a community-made patch for the game, working. Some other mods, like the widescreen mod though, didn't really work for unknown reasons, really. But hey, GTA San Andreas works near flawlessly. I did not expect this. I mean, look, I'm moving him around right now. Look at how smooth that is. That's really smooth. That's really smooth. Another game I didn't expect would work is the original Half-Life, and technically it actually does work. You just need to tweak it a little bit to get it playable to your liking. And the main menu has to be navigated through using the thumb pads because controller support for that menu is pretty much non-existent. Half-Life 2 and its episodes are very playable though, apart from some minor sound issues you might experience in episode 1. The original Portal also works flawlessly. I managed to beat the entire game on the Steam Deck and I had basically no problems with it. Same goes for Half-Life 2, I also managed to beat that game to completion as well as episode 1 on the Steam Deck, and maybe apart from some awkward control bindings, it was very playable, and even kind of fun. In Half-Life 2, you have to use the grip buttons to send commands to your followers in the later chapters of the game, and like I mentioned before, those buttons are quite stiff. I am not really a fan of them. You also use these buttons to shoot with the airboat gun and the Tau cannon attached to the buggy, and nope, still not a fan. Luckily, you can still remap these buttons to other buttons if you'd like to. Pretty much every game you play on the deck is fully configurable when it comes to how you control them. So would you like to avoid using the grip buttons on the back at all costs, then you can totally worm your way around them. But the more buttons a game uses, the more difficult this ends up being. Some PC games aren't really meant to be played with a controller, you know? Some games benefit from the extra buttons a keyboard has. And yes, you can connect a keyboard and a mouse and even a monitor to the Steam Deck to turn it into a fully fledged desktop PC, but that kinda defeats the purpose of a portable gaming device, right? But hey, you can do it! Other games that I attempted to run on here were, of course, Aperture Desk Job. I also tried Skyrim Special Edition, which worked pretty well. I tried Grand Theft Auto 4, which worked after a small amount of tweaking. I played a good bit of Hades, which is a game that is not very demanding, so it's not really surprising that it runs. The game that I was the most surprised about that just worked though was Teardown, a voxel-based game with ray-traced lighting and reflections where you can basically destroy anything you see. You have to tweak the settings a little bit to get the most frame rate out of it, but it's totally playable. This is the perfect game to just quickly load up to dick around inside of for the duration of a train ride. Think about it, this is a ray-traced game running on a portable device. Granted, it's not hardware-accelerated polygonal ray tracing, it does its own voxel-based thing, but it's still very impressive. All in all, I have really enjoyed my time so far with the Steam Deck. I've already taken it to places I never thought I would be able to take my PC games. Like inside of a train, or the office where I work. Or hell, I can even play Half-Life Source on the one place it belongs. The toilet! And yes, the Steam Deck does have its issues. The system UI for the Steam Deck could sometimes feel a little bit laggy or sluggish. I don't really feel much for the grip buttons on the back either, to be honest. The Steam and Quick Access buttons feel pretty cheap actually. And also, why is the Steam button not just the Steam logo? Wouldn't that make a lot more sense? Valve, what are you doing? It's almost perfect! But it's not! It's not! Oh, also, the fan is absolutely awful. It could drown out your game audio if you're playing on a particularly lower volume quite easily. So don't put your hand on the van for a particularly long amount of time because I think you could legit burn your hand after a while. That's how hot it gets sometimes, especially with very demanding games. So now comes the big question. Should you get yourself a Steam Deck? Well, if you think the good outweighs the bad stuff, then maybe you should. But if you're not impressed and you don't want to deal with having to tweak certain games to make them run, and if you don't particularly care for all the other features and freedoms that it comes with, then I actually dare to say, skip this. You won't really miss any kind of revolution, that's for sure. Maybe wait for the next Steam Deck model, or just stick with your Nintendo Switch. This is a product mainly aimed at enthusiasts who love to tinker around and who don't mind it when their games aren't immediately working straight out of the box. I have been a PC gamer most of my life, especially on janky PCs. I'm pretty used to games not working straight away, so I don't mind, but the sentiment is different for everyone. So these were my first impressions of the Steam Deck. Are you going to buy your own one? Please let us know in the comments below. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to play more games on this thing. To the toilet!